I am a woman with chronic schizophrenia. I spent hundreds and hundreds of days in psychiatric hospitals. I might have ended up living my life out in a back ward of a psychiatric hospital, but that hasn't been how things turned out. In fact, I've managed to stay free of psych hospitals for 30 years, perhaps my proudest accomplishment. That doesn't mean I've been free of all psychiatric struggle. As a young woman, I was in psychiatric hospitals for 3 lengthy periods on the East Coast. My doctors gave me a diagnosis of chronic schizophrenia, and my prognosis was said to be, quote, very poor and, quote, grave. In other words, I was expected to be unable to live independently, let alone to work. That hasn't turned out to be my life. Instead, I'm a chaired professor of law at the USC Gould School of Law, with a beloved husband, Will Vinay, and many close friends. I'd like to share with you how that happened and describe my experience of being psychotic. I qualify that by saying my experience, because everybody becomes psychotic in his or her own way. So for me, my psychosis is like a waking nightmare with all the bizarre images, impossible things happening, and the utter terror. But unlike with a nightmare where you can open your eyes and make it all stop, you can't make a psychotic episode stop by opening your eyes. So my own schizophrenia involves delusions, sometimes bizarre, like I've killed hundreds of thousands of people with my thoughts, or a nuclear explosion is about to go off in my brain. I've had occasional visual hallucinations, though not since the mid-90s when I started on the atypical antipsychotics, and I've had disorganized and confused speech. I've been spared the malignant negative symptoms of schizophrenia, except the first 2 years of my illness when I was unable to work and unable to make friends. I think my therapy interrupted those malignant negative symptoms. Several years ago, I decided to write down my experiences and my personal journey in the book, The Center Cannot Hold, My Journey Through Madness, and I want to share some of my story with you today to convey the inside view. So to give a flavor of my psychosis, the following episode occurred in November 1982 during the 7th week of my first semester at the Yale Law School, quoting from my book. My 2 classmates, Rebel and Val, and I were meeting in the library to work on our law memo assignment together, but we didn't get far before I started talking in ways that made no sense. Memos are visitations, I informed them. They make certain points. The point is on your head. Pat used to say that. Have you ever killed anyone? Rebel and Val looked at me like they or I had been splashed in the face with cold water. What are you talking about, Ellen? Oh, the usual, you know, who's what, what's who. Let's climb out of the library window onto the roof of the law school. It's safe. Rebel and Val followed and asked what had gotten into me. This is the real me, I announced, waving my arms above my head. And then, late on a Friday night, on the roof of the Yale Law School library, I began to sing, and not quietly either. Come to the Florida sunshine bush. Do you want to dance? Are you on drugs, one asked. Are you high? High? Me? No way, no drugs. Come to the Florida sunshine bush, where they make lemons, where there are demons. You're frightening me, one of them said, and then Rebel and Val headed back inside to the library. I shrugged and followed them. Back inside, I asked my classmates, are you having the same experiences as I am of words jumping around the pages? I think someone's infiltrated my copies of the cases. We've got a case to joint. I don't believe in joints, but they do hold your body together. So an example of loose associations. Eventually, I made my way back to my dorm room. And once there, I couldn't settle down. My head was too full of noise, too full of oranges and law memos I could not write, and mass murders I knew I would be responsible for. Sitting on my bed, I rocked back and forth, moaning in fear and isolation. Ending the passage. This episode led to my first psychiatric hospitalization in America. I had had a couple in England prior to that, continuing with my writings. The next morning, I went to my professor's office to ask for an extension on the memo assignment, and I began gibbering unintelligibly as I had the night before. He eventually brought me to the ER. Someone I'll just call the doctor and his whole team of goons swooped down, grabbed me, lifted me out of my chair, and slammed me down in a nearby bed with such force that I saw stars. Then they bound both my legs and arms to the metal bed with thick leather straps. A sound came out of my mouth that I'd never heard before. Half groan, half scream, barely human, and pure terror. Then the sound came again, forced from somewhere deep inside my belly and scraping my throat raw. Ending the passage. This incident resulted in my involuntary hospitalization. I was said to be not only dangerous to myself and others, but also gravely disabled. And the reason they wrote that I was gravely disabled was I couldn't do my Yale Law School homework, which made me wonder about much of the rest of New Haven and their civil committability. During the next year, I would spend 5 months in psychiatric hospitals. At times, I spent up to 20 hours in restraints, hands tied, hands and feet tied down, hands and feet tied down with a net tied tightly across my chest. I never struck anyone, I never harmed anyone, I never made any direct threats to anyone. In addition to long-term restraints, I was forcibly medicated at times and I had very little privacy. For example, I was watched often when I went to the bathroom and took a shower, and I was not allowed to talk to anybody, including my parents, outside the presence of staff. The British hospital could be guilty perhaps of benign neglect, or at least a hands-off approach, and I find that much preferable to the over-interventionist approach of the American hospitals. As I've come to say, I'm very pro-psychiatry, but very anti-force. I don't think force is effective as a treatment, and I think using force is a terrible thing to do to another human being with a terrible illness. Eventually, I came to Southern California to teach on the law faculty at the University of Southern California Gould School of Law. For years, I had resisted medication, making many, many efforts to get off of it. I firmly believe that if I could do with medication, I could prove once and for all that I really wasn't mentally ill, that it was all a big mistake. My motto was, the less medicine, the less effective. My analyst was saying that I should just get on the medication full time and get on with my life. I said I wanted to try one last time to give it the best try I could to get off the medication, and if it didn't work, I would stay on it. Quoting from the book. I started the reduction of my meds, and within a short time I began to feel its effects. After returning from a trip to Oxford, I walked into my analyst, Kaplan's office. I headed straight for the corner, crouched down on the floor, and began to shake. All around me were evil beings poised with daggers. They'd slice me up in thin slices or make me swallow hot coals. Kaplan would later describe me as, quote, writhing in agony. Even in this state, what he accurately described as, quote, acutely and floridly psychotic, I refused to take more meds. The mission is not yet complete. Immediately after the appointment with Kaplan, I went to see Dr. Martyr, a schizophrenia expert who was following me for tardive dyskinesia. He was under the impression that I had a mild illness, and I didn't disabuse him of that. Once in his office, I sat on his couch, folded over, and began muttering. Head explosions and people trying to kill. Is it okay if I totally trash your office? You need to leave if you think you're going to do that, said Martyr. Okay, small, fire on ice, tell them not to kill me, tell them not to kill me, what have I done wrong, all the explosions, hundreds and thousands of thoughts, interdiction. Ellen, do you feel you're dangerous to other people or yourself, he asked. I think you need to be in the hospital, and I could get you into UCLA right now, and the whole thing could be very discreet. Ha ha ha. You're offering to put me in the hospital? Hospitals are bad, they're mad, they're sad. One must stay away. I'm God, or I used to be. Actually, at that point in the manuscript, my husband, where I said I'm God or I used to be, wrote, did you quit or were you fired? I give life and I take it away. Forgive me for I know not what I do. Ending the passage. Eventually, I broke down in front of friends and acceded to everybody's demands that I take more medication. I could no longer deny the truth, and I could not change it. The wall that kept me, Ellen, Professor Sachs, separate from that insane woman who had been hospitalized years before, lay smashed and in ruins. Everything about this illness says I shouldn't be here, but I am, and I am, I think, for 3 reasons. First, I've had excellent treatment. Intensive psychoanalytic psychotherapy 4 to 5 days a week for decades and continuing. I know the theory, analysis is supposed to end, but I'm going to be a lifer. Also, this has been combined with excellent psychopharmacology once I accepted the need for medication. Second, I have many family members and close friends, and these people give my life a richness and a depth, and they're also another set of eyes to help me negotiate symptoms. Third, USC Law School is an enormously supportive place which has not only accommodated my needs but embraced them. At the same time, the law school is very intellectually stimulating. Occupying my mind with complex problems has been one of my most potent and reliable defenses against my mental illness. As I've come to say, my mind is both my worst enemy and my best friend. What those of us who suffer with mental illness want is what everyone wants. In the words of Sigmund Freud, to love and to work. Thank you.